Sarah Carter had never thought she'd spend Christmas alone. The loss of her husband, Daniel, had left her heart heavy and her home emptier than ever. She chose to retreat to their old family cabins deep in the woods, hoping the isolation might offer some solace. The cabin was modest but warm, surrounded by towering pine trees. Snow blanketed the ground, and the icy wind howled through the forest. Inside, the fire crackled softly, casting flickering shadows on the walls. Sarah had adorned the cabin with simple Christmas decorations, a string of lights around the fireplace, a small tree in the corner, and a single red stocking hung by the mantel. The night was peaceful, the kind of quiet that makes you feel utterly alone. Sarah sipped her hot cocoa and stared out the window at the snowstorm that had grown fiercer as the evening wore on. Just as the clock struck 9 p.m., a loud knock echoed through the cabin. Sarah froze, the mug halfway to her lips. Her heart pounded in her chest. Who could possibly be out here in the middle of a snowstorm? She hesitated before approaching the door, her fingers brushing against the handle. Another knock, more urgent this time, made her jump. Taking a deep breath, she opened the door a crack. A man stood on the porch, shivering violently. He was tall and lean, with scruffy hair and a scarf wrapped tightly around his neck. "Please," he said, his voice trembling. "My car broke down on the road. I've been walking for hours. Can I use your phone?" Sarah hesitated. The man didn't look threatening, but the isolation of the cabin made her cautious. Still, she couldn't leave him out in the storm. "Come in," she said, reluctantly stepping aside. The man introduced himself as David. His clothes were soaked and his hands shook as he warmed them by the fire. Sarah handed him a blanket and a mug of cocoa, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling creeping up her spine. "Thank you," he said, offering a weak smile. "I don't know what I would have done if I hadn't found this place." Sarah nodded, but said little. She watched him carefully, noting the strange way he glanced around the cabin, as if searching for something. "You said your car broke down?" she asked. "Yes," he replied, staring into the fire. "It just stopped working out of nowhere. I tried calling for help, but there's no signal out here." Sarah nodded again, still uneasy. As the night wore on, Sarah began to notice odd things. The lights flickered, though the storm had eased. She heard faint whispers, but when she turned to look, there was no one there. David grew increasingly restless, pacing the cabin and muttering under his breath. "Are you okay?" she asked, trying to mask her concern. He stopped abruptly and looked at her, his eyes wide and haunted. "Do you believe in spirits?" Sarah frowned. "Spirits? You mean ghosts?" David nodded, his hands trembling. "This place, there's something wrong with it. I can feel it." David sat down and began to speak, his voice low and shaky. "Years ago, there was a family that lived here. They were murdered on Christmas Eve. A man broke in and slaughtered them." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "That's not possible. My husband and I bought this cabin 10 years ago. We never heard anything like that." David shook his head. "The story is true. The murderer was never caught, and they say the spirits of the family still linger here, trapped by the violence that ended their lives." Sarah's stomach churned. "How do you know this?" David didn't answer. He just stared into the fire, his face pale. As the clock struck midnight, the cabin grew eerily silent. Sarah felt a strange pressure in the air, as if the walls were closing in. David stood suddenly, his expression frantic. "I shouldn't have come here," he said, his voice shaking. "They'll come for me now." "What are you talking about?" Sarah demanded. He turned to her, his eyes filled with terror. "I was there that night. I was the one who let the killer in. I thought he was just a traveler like me, but he killed them all." Sarah backed away, her heart pounding. "What are you saying?" "I've been running from them ever since," David whispered. "But you can't escape the past. They always find you." Before Sarah could respond, the lights went out, plunging the cabin into darkness. She heard the whispers again, louder this time, and the sound of footsteps coming from the attic. David screamed, a blood-curdling sound that echoed through the cabin. When Sarah turned to look, he was gone. The whispers grew louder, turning into guttural voices. The attic door creaked open, and Sarah felt a cold breeze wash over her. She stood frozen, her breath visible in the icy air. Slowly, she turned toward the stairs. The story ends with Sarah's scream piercing the night, leaving her fate and the truth about David a mystery.